giant corporations rule the day.
Welcome back to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're talking about the prospects for the EU and the euro. But before, let's see what currency Russians prefer to save their money in.
2 decades ago, when the euro was conceived, nobody expected it to go through anything like the current financial crisis. Now, many wonder what the prospects are for the currency and the entire European experiment. Even the idea of breaking up the currency zone has been mentioned. With the euro viability questioned, the currency is weakening. The Levada Center has asked Russians which currency they prefer. 46% of those polled say the Russian ruble. 19% opt for several currencies. 11% cited the euro and only 6% US dollar. Thus, the trust in ruble is growing while the euro's role is diminishing. Peter?
John, I'd like to go to you. There's over last few days, people have been talking about this new kind of e-bond, euro bond, it's really quite amazing to me. I mean, in the countries that like the idea, especially Greece, who brought out of Portugal, Spain, what seems really interesting to me is that they don't want to fix this problem. They want to institutionalize moral hazard, because it is really all of this means is that the Germans pay for everything. Okay, and no wonder the Germans are saying enough, because they made a political decision, and I think everyone wants to feel happy about being in Europe, or past conflicts and all of this, and a terrific history in the past. Okay, we all agree on that. That's good, but why should the Germans have to continue to pay? Because it's a political decision. It's not an economic one.
Sure. Peter, it's simple, isn't it? It's a sticking plaster on a severed jugular, these euro bonds. It will not stop the problem. The problem is you cannot tie these economies together. Of course, pig economies like Greece and Spain and Portugal, maybe even Italy, they would love this. Ireland would love it. I watched the Irish budget 2 days ago, and they were talking about, the austerity cuts they're going to put in place. But their child benefit is greater than the United Kingdom's. Their corporation tax is at 12.5%. That's why loads of European companies have relocated to Dublin and to Ireland. So basically, they want to have better benefits than us. They want to take all the business there. They want to spend as if money's going, the euro's going out of fashion. And then they want countries like the United Kingdom, and indeed, particularly Germany, to bail them out. So now, of course, the German people, who have actually kept control of their banks and have kept control of their property boom, are saying enough is enough, or they're saying no. They are not going to pay. And I can see, even though Germany were largely the architect of the European Union, I can see the German people turning against this. And of course it's a good idea. Of course we don't want to have more world wars or wars in Europe. That is good. But the bottom line here is they wanted to enforce currency equality across Europe and unity and union before political union. But the bottom line is, I don't think people in the UK want political union. We just want a trading relationship, and this is why it's doomed to fail. And I think within 5 months, certainly within 5 years, the euro will be no more. And I'll tell you something else. I think the European Union has got major, major problems. There needs to be a reform. They want to even increase their budget. There were 100,000 people protesting on the streets of Brussels 4 weeks ago, whilst inside the Commission they were voting to put up their hospitality budget to 2.1 million. They want to drink more champagne and swallow more oysters while we lose our blooming jobs. How How's that fair on ordinary middle-income taxpayers in Europe? Answer, it's not. This this euro is a dead currency. It is deceased. It is no more. It's like the dead parrot in the famous Monty Python sketch.
I was just thinking of that.
Over.
All right, Rodney, I'm going to go to Rodney. Rodney, I mean, one of the things is that right before we went on, we were talking about the lack of real strong political leadership today. We were talking about it in Europe. I would say also in the United States because there's such deadlock right now. Yeah. But, I mean, there seems to be no vision out there in researching this program. I don't see anybody seriously trying to fix the problem of the euro and the problem of the European Union itself. They just want to get by. They just want to get to the next election, or no one wants to make any hard decisions because hard decisions people have to be made responsible for. And I think all because of this whole experiment, austerity is going to be necessary in some ways, but it has to be more equitable, and that's not what we're getting.
Well, they just want to get by because of the underlying doctrine is that the free market always comes into balance. It's not a free market. No. They always say it comes into balance, therefore cling on, carry on as we are, and everything will be okay. But they just do not see what is the situation is built up. It's been built up since probably about the last 40 or 50 years. It's been accentuated by getting rid of legislative restraints like the Glass-Steagall Act. And on top of that, you've got computerization, and then you've taken all these massive trillions of derivative contracts which are actually outside the banking system. Put that all together and you're going into one awful large-scale crash. And that there are pygmy politicians in Europe. There's no one who is actually prepared to see that behind this is an out-of-control banking system and an arrogant elite. And unless you're prepared to stand up, say that, and for a start, stop the banks creating money and open up an interest-free loan supply for the real economy. And that was done under Roosevelt. It was done in Australia and Canada and New Zealand with great success. But then they gradually, in committees late at night, the banking lobby, trade associations started to change the thing so that today every government has to borrow interest. If I can just take one simple example. In the UK, we can generate 10% of our electricity supply by a huge scheme on the River Severn. Now, this old technology, no problem at all, creates a massive amount of work. And the government has just decided to scotch that project because they would borrow the money at interest from the banking system. And by the time the project was built, the cost of it would have gone to 3 or 4 times the original amount which is borrowed. In other words, they never ever repay it. And the compound interest has made the whole situation out of control. There must be a challenge on this practice of the private banks creating the money and endlessly putting on compound interest.
So what would your solution be then, Rodney? I understand your criticism, but what would your solution be?
Rodney, you want to fill that? Go ahead.
You want to ask me? Yep. Okay. Number one.
I'm asking you. I'm interested in your theory, but I want to know how you see that happening in practical terms.
Okay, here we go. By a gradual rise to 100% reserves, you stop the banks creating money. You say, banks, you may lend your own money, carry on, do what it likes, chuck it away if you want. You may lend the deposits of your depositors, of your customers, with permission. Yep. Then at the same time, you open up an interest-free loan supply administered by the banks, who may charge an administration cost but not interest. And this loan supply to go for the development and spreading of the real economy. It'd be exactly the same as at present, except it'd be interest-free, and there'd be one further condition that, in fact, you must spread the economy. To take one example, I mean, the students are on the streets of London at this moment. And I nearly didn't get to this broadcast because they're blocking the streets. And for students, it should be interest-free loans and only an administration cost. But they're being screwed. They're going to be debt serfs for the whole of their lives, and their children will be debt serfs as well.
You know, it's very interesting, gentlemen. I'm going to go to John now. It's interesting that Rodney brings that up because this is what's happened to millions and millions of Americans. They pay enormous amounts of money for their undergraduate education. There are no jobs out there. They could be a waitress or a waiter, and you have a debt of $120,000, $150,000, and there is a lot of interest there accumulating there, and it creates this dead end. And this is really what's happened in in Europe, because if it wasn't there before, it's actually happened now. We have an apartheid system.
Yeah.
We use the pigs, but it's very appropriate, okay? Because Greeks and Spaniards and Portuguese said you can live like Germans, but you don't have to work for it, okay? And this is really what
and you never have to pay them back.
And you never have to pay them back. But now the cows are coming home. I mean, go ahead, John. I mean, what we've seen is the Eurozone is actually impoverished its members. It will continue to impoverish some of its members.
Yeah. Well, I'm suggesting to students they should take out the maximum loan that they possibly can and then just act like the banks and never pay it back. Just default on the loans, because that seems to be what bankers are doing. But, yeah, when it comes to Europe, there just simply isn't enough money in the pot. I mean, there is some merit in what Rodney is proposing. And certainly when it comes to students, I mean, I actually do believe the students who are paying £3,300 a year at the moment, I think that's a reasonable amount to contribute towards your further education, because you should get a better job. What's absolutely inexcusable is this U-turn by one of our political parties, Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems, where now they're going to try and triple it to £9,000 a year. No wonder children, young people are out on the streets today. Coming back to Europe, of course, what we have is we have a situation which many people, older than me, I must say, part of the Eurosceptic movement, right from the beginning said, this will never work. This political union can't work, and this fiscal union is doomed to failure. We have a position here in the United Kingdom, for goodness sake, where Polish people, because of freedom of movement, can come to England. So men come and work in the United Kingdom and they contribute with their tax and everything else. However, then they can claim benefits for their children, child benefit. Well, you might say that's perfectly fair. Apart from, of course, our child benefit is a lot greater than in Poland. Now, wait for the big killer one on this, Peter. Not only that, they don't have to bring their children with them or even prove they've got children back in Warsaw in Poland, and we pay the child benefit for that child. How can that work? It can't. You have to have the same taxation, the same benefit system, if a political or monetary union is going to work amongst countries. And we haven't got it. It doesn't work. It was doomed to failure from the beginning, and it is going to crash and burn. And soon people are going to wake up. They've already woken up in places like Barcelona, Madrid, and in France, in Paris, and as I said, in Brussels earlier. Ordinary people are going to say, why should we be bailing out the bankers again? The bankers and the politicians, with their lax regulation, seem to have got away with this scot-free.
Okay.
19 multimillionaires.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, we've
British
run out of time here. We've run out of time
Ridiculous.
here. But I want to thank both my guests today in Birmingham and in London, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules.